They say there are days when the air itself feels like it's holding its breath, days when something is about to break, but no one knows it yet. And that morning on the Coronado training fields felt exactly like that. A hot, humming stillness hanging over the sand, as though the coastline knew a storm was coming long before any of us did. If you've ever believed that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one everyone should be paying attention to, make sure to like and subscribe, because what happened next would prove just how dangerous assumptions can be, especially on a base built on discipline, ego, and the mythology of strength. I didn't come there expecting a spectacle. None of us did. We were just observers stationed near the graded seal Bud/S evaluation lanes, watching candidates run drills, scale walls, carry boats overhead, and push their exhausted bodies past limits they didn't know existed. But then I saw her, a woman in her late 20s, wearing a plain charcoal hoodie and jeans, her hair pulled back in a simple, almost careless twist, standing far off from the taped boundary line like she'd been told to stay out of the way. She wasn't tall, wasn't imposing, yet something about her posture, relaxed but razor-balanced, made me look twice. She didn't fidget. She didn't sway. She didn't check her phone or peer around with the lost confusion of a visitor. She just watched the candidates, eyes scanning with a quiet precision that didn't match her civilian clothes. I didn't know her name then. All I knew was that she looked like someone who had seen war up close and had come back with the kind of silence people earn, not adopt. Later, I'd learned her call sign was Wraith, a Tier 1 special operations operator whose missions were buried so deep in classified vaults that most officers on the base didn't even know a woman like her existed. But in that moment, she was just a civilian standing in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the wrong man noticed her. Marine Colonel Harwood, tall, rigid, with a voice that liked to make people flinch, was overseeing the evaluation that morning, pacing near the instructors with the self-importance of a man who believed the sun rose for him out of professional courtesy. When his eyes landed on the woman near the rail, they narrowed with immediate irritation, then something darker. The instinctive contempt of someone who believed authority gave him the right to crush whatever bothered him. "Who is that?" he barked to one of his staff sergeants. Not because he needed to know, but because he already assumed she didn't belong. "Get her out of my range." The sergeant jogged over and asked her, politely enough, to relocate. She nodded, thanked him, and stepped farther back. But Harwood wasn't satisfied. He kept watching her, like the very sight of a woman near his training lanes was an insult he needed to correct. A few instructors shot each other awkward glances. They could see what I saw. She wasn't interfering, wasn't filming, wasn't talking. She was just present. But Harwood was a man who liked obedience more than logic, and the longer she stayed within his line of sight, the more his jaw clenched. Then fate twisted the knife. One of the candidates, a young, unsteady swimmer, collapsed near her section of the course, and she instinctively stepped forward half a pace, ready to assist before the medical team rushed in to handle it. That tiny human response seemed to send Harwood over the edge. He snapped toward his instructors. "Stop the drill," he ordered, his voice slicing through the humid air. "I want her checked and removed. I don't care if she's somebody's girlfriend or someone's mother. She's in a restricted area. Take her off my field." The staff sergeant approached her again, this time with visible reluctance, as if he knew the colonel was about to make a fool of himself but didn't dare disobey. "Ma'am," he said, voice tight, "you need to come with us." She met his eyes, calm, almost compassionate, like she could feel the trouble forming around her. "I'm waiting for someone," she said quietly. "I'm supposed to meet a Master Chief here at 9. But Harwood had already marched over himself, boots thudding like a warning drum. "Who authorized you to be here?" he demanded, planting himself inches from her. She didn't shrink, not even a millimeter. "Sir," she said, her voice low and even, "you're making a mistake." That was the moment the colonel decided she was challenging him, and his pride ignited faster than dry brush. "Don't you tell me what I'm doing," he snapped. "You're trespassing on an active training field, and you will comply with my orders." Around us, the candidates slowed, their eyes subtly tracking the confrontation. Even exhausted and covered in sand, some of them looked at her with a strange flicker of recognition, not of her face, but of her bearing. They whispered to each other, confused. She moved like one of them. Harwood didn't notice. Or maybe he did and refused to care. "Instructors," he barked, gesturing sharply. Remove her. The staff sergeant hesitated. Sir, we can escort her. No, Harwood thundered. If she refuses, restrain her. Break her jaw if you have to. She will not defy a direct order on my field. The entire range went silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. I watched the woman inhale, slow and pained, not with fear, but disappointment, so deep it almost softened her expression. She looked at Harwood the way someone might look at a reckless child playing with gasoline and matches. Then she lifted her eyes to his and said, almost gently, Colonel, please don't do this. But he already had, and none of us yet understood just how catastrophic that decision would be. In the next heartbeat, the instructors closed in, reaching for her arms, completely unaware that the quiet woman they were about to lay hands on was one of the most lethal operators the U.S. military had ever produced. What happened in the next 7 seconds became something me instructors would later replay in their minds like a slow-motion car crash, each of them describing it differently, but all agreeing on one thing. They never even saw her move. As the first instructor reached for her wrist, a gentle grip, because he was trying to make the colonel's order look less insane, her body shifted with a whisper of motion, a pivot so fluid it looked like she was turning to greet an old friend rather than counter a tactical hold. But in that same heartbeat, she redirected his arm with a precision that defied instinct, angling his momentum downward, as if gravity itself suddenly betrayed him. He hit the sand before his brain registered he was falling. The second instructor lunged, faster and harder, trying to lock her in a shoulder hold. But she turned sideways, let his arm pass in front of her, hooked it with a controlled torque, and eased him down with such care that he landed flat on his back, breath punched out, but unharmed. The third instructor, embarrassed by how effortlessly she'd neutralized his teammates, came in with brute force. And that was the only time her expression changed. Not fear, not anger, but a flicker of something like regret. She stepped inside his reach, tapped his knee at the exact angle to make it buckle without damaging it, and guided him to the ground like she was lowering a heavy box. 3 men down. No aggression, no strikes, no pain beyond bruised pride. The entire training field froze as if someone had pressed a cosmic pause button. Even the candidates stopped mid-carry, their boats sagging unevenly as all heads turned toward the commotion. A few of them, especially the older prior service ones, stared at her with something approaching reverence, as though they finally understood why her stance had felt familiar. This wasn't self-defense. This was art. But Colonel Harwood saw none of that. All he saw was a woman, someone he had dismissed, someone he had underestimated, making him look weak in front of candidates he was supposed to command with iron authority. His face flushed a violent red, veins rising along his neck like cables under strain. Cuff her, he roared at the instructors struggling to their feet. I said cuff her. Before anyone could move, a voice thundered across the sand, so sharp it hit the air like a blade. Stand down. All of you stand. Down. Every spine snapped rigid. Every head turned. The woman, Rafe, didn't move at all. It was the Master Chief, Royce, a man built like a brick wall, 27 years in the teams, 5 deployments with DevGru, and a reputation for ending stupidity before it had the chance to breathe. He was sprinting toward them, rage and disbelief etched into every line of his face. Harwood, startled, tried to recompose himself. Master Chief, this is a restricted, shut your mouth right now, Royce snapped, not slowing his stride. He positioned himself between Harwood and the woman, turning toward the instructors with a voice that brooked no argument. Nobody touches her. Nobody lays a damn finger on her. The instructors, suddenly pale, backed away. One of them muttered, Master Chief, we didn't know. The colonel told us she was. I don't care what he told you, Royce barked. Use your eyes. Use your brain. He turned to Rafe then, and the shift in him was immediate, like watching a storm break into calm the moment it reaches the eye. He gave her a crisp, respectful nod. Operator. She inclined her head slightly. Master Chief. Harwood blinked, confused, furious, completely out of his depth. What the hell is going on here? Who is she? Royce didn't look at him as he answered. That somehow made it worse. Her name is classified, he said. Her missions are classified. Her existence is classified. But since you've already made a spectacular mess, let's make this simple. He turned his head just enough to glare at the colonel, voice lowering into something cold and Lethal. She's DevGru, sir. She's a SEAL operator. The gasp that rolled through the observers was instant and unanimous. A female SEAL, the kind of operator you only heard rumors about in dark corners of deployment stories, standing in jeans and a hoodie after putting 3 Marines into the sand without breaking a sweat. Harwood sputtered. That's impossible. Women aren't. Women aren't in your world, Royce cut in. Not in your unit. Not on your radar. But operators? Real ones. They come from everywhere, and she's one of the best we've got. Harwood's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, like a fish gasping on a dock. Every instructor avoided his eyes. Several candidates stared at the woman with something like awe. But the humiliation for Harwood wasn't over, not even close. A group of officers approached from the far side of the field, the command master chief, several staff officers, and the base admiral himself. Their faces said everything. Someone had called them. Someone had told them what was happening, and they were not pleased. The admiral's boots hit the sand with precision as he strode straight toward Rafe and Royce, ignoring Harwood entirely at first. Operator, he acknowledged. She gave a respectful nod. Sir. Only then did he turn to Harwood. Colonel, the admiral said tightly. I understand you ordered your men to use force on a Tier 1 asset. And not just any asset. One who has saved American operators on missions you'll never even read about. Harwood swallowed hard, color draining. Sir, I wasn't informed. You didn't ask, the admiral snapped, voice cracking like a rifle shot. You don't get to brutalize civilians on instinct, and you sure as hell don't get to brutalize a national asset because your ego got bruised. Every person on that field stood completely still. Even the waves seemed to hush. Rafe looked at the admiral with calm neutrality, but there was an unmistakable sadness in her eyes now. Disappointment heavier than anger. Sir, she said softly, I'm fine, and I don't need anyone punished for me. Harwood looked like he might collapse in relief, but she wasn't finished. But I won't pretend this didn't happen, she continued. Because if it happened to me, someone else, someone with no way to defend themselves, might end up hurt. The admiral nodded somberly. And it won't happen again. Royce stepped forward, voice steady but sharp. Sir, with permission, I'd like to request immediate removal of Colonel Harwood from the training field pending review. The admiral didn't hesitate. Approved. And just like that, the man who had barked the order to break her jaw was escorted off the field, not with force, but with the quiet, suffocating shame that comes from realizing the entire world just watched you pick a fight with a ghost who could have ended you before your next breath. Rafe watched him go without triumph, without malice, only that same steady, unreadable silence. And in that stillness, the entire base seemed to understand exactly why she was called Rafe. When the colonel was finally escorted off the range, head bowed, shoulders tight, and rage burning behind his humiliation, the entire training field seemed to exhale at once, as if every person present had been holding their breath without realizing it. But Rafe didn't watch him go with satisfaction or vengeance. She simply turned her eyes back to the candidates still frozen mid-drill, studying them with the same measured calm she had held from the moment she stepped onto the field. The admiral gestured for training to halt, and instructors gathered around her in a wide semicircle, unsure whether to speak, salute, or simply stare. Royce broke the silence with a low, steady tone that carried more authority than any shout. Operator, would you be willing to demonstrate to the candidates what you just did? They've never seen de-escalation handled like that. For a moment, it looked as though she might decline, her posture still guarded, her breath still steadying from the tension of being forced into a confrontation she never wanted. But then she nodded once. If it helps them, she said, yes. And with that, the atmosphere shifted from confrontation to education as seamlessly as a tide turning. She stepped into an open area, motioning for the 3 instructors she'd taken down to join her, not out of humiliation, but partnership. What I did, she explained, her voice carrying effortlessly across the sand, wasn't aggression. It was prevention. If you can end a threat without causing damage, you do it. Violence should be the last language you ever speak. She demonstrated each move slowly, guiding the instructors through the same redirections and takedowns she had executed instinctively moments earlier. This time, though, her hands were gentle, and she narrated her motions with precision, explaining momentum, center of gravity, joint protection, and the difference between dominance and control. The candidates watched in rapt attention. Even the ones too exhausted to stand straight leaned forward, absorbing every word like scripture. One young candidate, no older than 20, raised a tentative hand. "Ma'am, you didn't even look angry when they came at you." Rafe paused, then gave him a small, thoughtful smile. "Anger gets you killed," she said softly. "Clarity keeps you alive." Another candidate asked how she stayed so calm. This time, her answer was quieter, carrying a weight that settled over the entire field. "I've seen real fear. Real stakes. Real loss. This," she gestured around at the sand, the equipment, the embarrassed instructors. "This was just a misunderstanding." That single word, misunderstanding, held more grace than any of them would have managed under the same circumstances. Even the admiral seemed moved by it. When the demonstration concluded, the command master chief stepped forward to thank her, but she shook her head lightly. "Don't thank me," she said. "Fix the culture that made this possible." The words hung in the air like a challenge no one dared reject. The admiral nodded solemnly. "Understood," he said, "and it will be addressed." True to his promise, he announced, right there in front of everyone, that the base would be implementing new training on implicit bias, de-escalation, and identification of Allied special assets in civilian clothing. Not as a formality, but as a necessity, and though no one said it aloud, every person present knew the seminar would be built around one morning on the training field where a colonel nearly ignited an international incident with a single reckless order. After the crowd began to disperse, Rafe prepared to leave quietly, slipping into the same unassuming presence she'd arrived with. But Royce approached her, stopping her with a rare, earnest softness in his voice. "You didn't have to go easy on those men," he said. "Hell, you could have torn this place apart if you wanted to." She met his gaze, and for the first time, something like exhaustion flickered in her eyes, an exhaustion not of the body, but of carrying a truth too heavy for most to understand. "Master Chief," she replied, "people like us, we know what real fights look like. I won't manufacture one when I have the choice to walk away." Royce considered that, then nodded with the deep respect of a man who had seen enough war to recognize someone shaped by it. "Take care of yourself, operator," he said, using her title not out of formality but honor. She offered him a small nod in return. "And take care of them," she said, glancing at the candidates who still whispered about the mysterious woman who moved like the wind. "They'll need leaders who understand the difference between command and control." With that, she walked toward the edge of the field, disappearing into the glow of the late morning sun the same way she moved in combat. Silent, deliberate, almost ghost-like. And though no announcement marked her departure, every person there felt the shift she left behind. A reminder that true strength isn't loud, true authority isn't forced, and the most dangerous person in any room is often the one who never asks to be noticed. In the end, the story of the colonel's downfall spread across the base like a cautionary legend, but the story of the woman who caused it, calmly, gracefully, without a single strike thrown, spread even faster. From that day forward, whenever someone mentioned the name Rafe, they did so with a tone usually reserved for heroes or for ghosts who walk among us only long enough to change everything before vanishing again.